Micro tool, the tone mirror. A technique for sensing emotional states without absorbing them. Real-time emotional reading is not about joining the client's emotional field, it is about noticing it without letting it color your own. When a tone shift occurs, whether sharper, quieter, softer, quicker, or suddenly formal, listen not for what has changed, but for why the shift occurred in that exact sentence. The tone mirror is a simple, silent act. You briefly match the emotional quality in your mind without echoing it aloud. This gives you a direct sense of the climate without feeding into it. It's like placing a hand near a fire to gauge the heat without touching the flame. Once you feel the emotional temperature, your response becomes clearer. You choose pace and tone deliberately rather than reactively. You decide whether the moment needs calmness, precision, reassurance, or space. Clients feel this instantly. They experience you not as someone who mirrors their stress but as someone who understands it from the outside. Reading emotion is not the same as absorbing it. Leadership comes from the distance you keep. Case, the voice that hid the real message. During a quarterly review, a multilingual manager from Poland reported the team's progress. Her tone was even, steady, deliberately neutral. She described delays matter-of-factly and presented solutions without drama. Everything about her demeanor suggested calm competence. Halfway through, her tone shifted, barely. The words remained professional, but the breath between sentences shortened. The softness in her voice tightened slightly when she discussed a stakeholder who had blocked approvals. A native English speaker on the call would have missed it because the vocabulary remained diplomatic and controlled. The team lead didn't miss it. He recognized that tiny shift as emotional weather turning. He slowed his own tone and asked, "Which part of this situation is costing you the most energy?" She exhaled audibly. The real story emerged. The stakeholder was undermining her in subtle ways, and she was struggling to address it across cultural and linguistic lines. The emotional climate was never in the words. It was in the micro-tone. When you learn to hear the emotional temperature beneath the phrasing, you catch conversations before they collapse. Scenario practice, the micro-tone shift. Next time you hear a tone that feels slightly different, tighter, softer, quicker, mirror it internally without copying it externally. Then ask yourself, what emotional weight is shaping this tone? Respond with steadiness, not reaction. Reflection, the 1 second that changes everything. Every conversation has a tipping point, a single second where meaning begins to drift, where the emotional tone tightens or softens, where pace becomes just a little too fast or too slow, where the clarity in your mind no longer matches what you hear. You rarely notice that moment while it's happening. But when you learn to sense it earlier, even by a breath or two, the entire shape of the interaction shifts. Preventing miscommunication is rarely dramatic. It's not about correcting people or catching mistakes. It's about becoming attuned to the first small signal that something is bending and choosing to steady the space before the distortion grows. When you begin noticing that 1 second, you start guiding conversations long before they derail. And you discover that prevention is not a skill, it's a form of presence.